Hey, welcome back to Art Is, a podcast for artists. It's been a little while since we've been back, but I'm so happy to share that this new season is going to all be about talking directly with artists about what's going on with them, what's top of mind, their practices, and just be a lot more conversational about what's going on for us. So I'm really excited to get to be joined today by a new friend, a new artist in my world, Alex Rane, who's a marble carver, a sculptor, and a painter. He works across a lot of different media, and we actually got to meet a few months back, and then we connected again at his studio in Carrara. So it's been really interesting to get to have this ongoing dialogue with him, and I wanted to share with you guys as well. Alex, welcome. So happy to have you with us. And how about you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm excited to do this, see how it goes. So yeah, like you said, I do work in a lot of mediums, but I do see myself as a marble sculptor. That's what I am passionate about and what I fell in love with. I grew up in an artist household, and so I've always been around art and knew that I wanted to be in the arts. But about 10 years ago, I made the move over to Italy from New York. And I found my way to this little studio in Carrara, and I've pretty much been here ever since, and worked in kind of the same studio, and just trying to figure out life. And the original plan was just to stay in Italy for a year or two, and then move my practice back to New York. But I found that it's just so easy to be here in Italy, and I really love the lifestyle, and I have great friends here. And this way, it gives me the space to be creative in the way that I want to. And that way is just with marble, and I keep going bigger and bigger. And at this point, it would be fairly difficult to do this somewhere else. I need forklifts and cranes and people who understand marble, and not to mention just being at the foot of the quarries, and I can go up any day I want and pick out a block and have it delivered the next day, it's pretty unique and pretty special.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, Alex's studio is like one of the coolest places I've ever been to. It's like under this like antique train track in this huge, incredible complex, this kind of ex-industrial space it looks like it's snowing down there because it's just completely covered in the white dust of marble. And it's just amazing. So getting to work there, I can totally understand why you're settled there. It's so cool. So you've been there for a while. What have you discovered in terms of being a marble carver, like in a source of marble too? Because like I work in marble and I get to go to Carrara a lot, and it's awesome. And every time I go there, I'm like so energized and I feel like supercharged by the environment. But then I leave and I take my marble with me, and you're like there, like at the energy source. So what's that like?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I actually feel like what comes to mind is it is the marble, it is this material, and I'd love to talk more about the material because I think we both have that passion. But what comes to mind is actually the community, like the people. And it's hard to be a sculptor without having other people around you. It's a little bit different than being a painter, where you're just in your studio and in your head. And when you're a sculptor, you always need a hand with something, like multiple times a day. And I work in this studio that's a group studio. And at the moment, everybody's gone. It's the middle of winter. Nobody, it's a surprisingly harsh winter here in Carrara. Not that much snow. Never really snow, but it's so humid that it just is really biting. And so I've been alone in the studio for the last month or so, and it just makes it difficult. Everything's a little bit slower, and out of necessity, you gain a good community, and I think that's really important. And in addition to that, a lot of Carrara is world famous for marble, and it's a bit of a sculptor's mecca. And so I always say, like, every sculptor in the world at some point passes through Carrara or Pietrasanta. because it has such historical significance. It's not a huge tourist place, but it is for artists and sculptors, whether you work in marble or not. Like even you came through here because it's just really, I don't know, it's a must see and you have to experience it.
Yeah, it's true. I'll try to put up some photos and videos and stuff so people can actually see if you haven't experienced it yet. But it is really a magical place. And I just love the like 360 view and the topography that you have there. And then you just get to go and see like the scale of the blocks. And it was so cool to talk to you about like how you get your blocks and like how the community has played into that, and just like the evolution of the practice over the past years, and how that's like also impacted the kind of work that you're making.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what you're working on now, and like any evolution there or like thoughts on the practice.
Yeah, like you said, the scale of the blocks is quite interesting because you go up into the quarries and these massive 30-ton blocks, compared to the mountain, they seem quite small. And then you bring something I've been bringing a few pieces that are between 3 and 5 and even 8 tons, which is pretty significant. But I get it into my studio and it looks bigger than it does in the quarries. But the studio is also quite big and I have the space to work on it. And then I move that block into a gallery or into another space, and it just looks completely different scale wise. And I don't know, for me, I love the process of this from start to finish. And there's nothing better than that initial like moment of picking out a block and seeing it, and then claiming it, writing your name in crayon on it. And then they tend to be really generous and nice up in the quarries, at least to artists. So they usually give us a good deal or whatever. And then you write your name in crayon on the block that you want, and then organize a truck, have it delivered to the studio. And that is like, you always get this moment of just incredible excitement when you see that and get it placed. And I personally never really, at least I don't like to think about a concept or a design or the pose or anything before I see the block. I like to let the material dictate a little bit what it's going to be. And that's become more and more important to me as time goes on. I think I was a little bit self-conscious of that when I first started, because I felt like the work maybe felt less authentic because I was just making figures and I didn't know what they meant. And when I was younger and less confident in what that meant, I was self-conscious in kind of saying that because I wasn't really even titling the work until the very end. But I found that something magical tends to happen in the process. And when you're working authentically, like it just feels like the meaning evolves and develops and reveals itself. And that has been the most fascinating and surprising aspect of being an artist. And I know that everyone works differently, and there are so many different ways to practice art. And I know incredible, more conceptual based. I don't like to think of anything in the binary, but there is, if I think of it as a continuum between this conceptual practice or material based practice, like I'm more on the material based side because I think there's a natural intelligence in the material and this intuition that reveals itself. But it's not a binary. There is obviously a mix and a complete back and forth. And sometimes I've had ideas come through that feel like are really important and I need to get them out. Sometimes that works out. Sometimes it just doesn't. And sometimes I'm completely blocked until, I think a lot of artists experience this, like you may be blocked mentally until you put your hands on the material, and then things start to flow a little bit more. And that to me is everything. That is essentially why I do this. And it becomes just revelatory as well. Like at the end, it's a little scary, but sometimes I see things in it that I didn't realize I was expressing. And that's also a magical moment in art, that it can reveal a little bit more than you planned. And it's hard to predict,
I think you said it so beautifully about the intelligence of the material, because I really felt that too with marble. And I don't think I've ever really felt it with any other material. And maybe because it's a natural material formed like hundreds of millions of years ago, like there's like a sanctity to it. And it's just, it does have its own like volition. And I love that idea of like you in front of this like huge block and just like not knowing until you're there with your hands, and then you just go and flow, and it just evolves as is, because of course marble is subtractive. So once you take away, you can't put it back on. And I think there's such a like a fierceness in that too, and the risk that you have to take, that like everything you do is final. I found that it's actually helped me like become a better like decision maker and more secure in stuff, because it is what it is. And you have to just be more secure in your decisions and choices. It's not like clay where you just like, you're making a form and then you're like, oh no, something's off, squish it back down and start again. It's like, it's not the same.
Absolutely.
And in that sense, it's made me, because of that, start to work on a lot of pieces at the same time, because of the frustration that comes out too, is that sometimes you're just not in the right headspace, or you're tired or something. And just think about the material removal of a block of your size. I've never worked on that size yet. I hope to one day, but even on a small scale that I'm working in, it's so imperative that you're in the right headspace. So I found that working on many pieces at one time can really help with that, because as much drama and material removal there is like at the beginning, there's also a lot of tedious work in marble, just sanding and just really smoothing and doing all different finishes that you have to do in order to create a finished, polished piece. And so I was wondering, like, do you do that? Do you work on multiple pieces, or do you get into one and you're locked in, or like, how does the flow work for you?
Yeah, there's a couple things there, because I think part of being an artist is, at least like a professional artist, is pushing through those difficult times and just working even when, you're not in the exact right headspace. And, but that being said, like I also, for me, I like to work on multiple pieces at the same time. It definitely helps to get over the frustration, get past these certain points that are just blocking you. But that sometimes leaves me completely spread out and spread too thin. And so I have to pull back and try to work on just one or two pieces at a time. And as far as decision making, like, I'm not a very decisive person, as everyone in my life will tell you, but one time I was working on a big sculpture, and it was important, and I knew I needed to get it done, but I was frustrated, and I think you could see that in the block. The block reveals everything. And this other artist that I know from out of town, he came through the studio, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and he could clock immediately what was happening with the stone. And it was basically, I was becoming too tentative with it, because I started off really strong. I knew what I wanted to do. And I then changed a couple of ideas, and I wasn't quite sure what was right. And I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what to do. And he gave me a really good piece of advice, which was just, there is no right or wrong in art. It is, but you have to make the decision, and whatever that decision is the right one. It helped me get over that mental block that, at least in this instance, it didn't matter. These are arbitrary things that nobody else is thinking about, but you get so in your head that like you're going to ruin the piece if you change it this way or that way. And a lot of times it's just about confidence and making that decision and going with it. Because what are the things that you like in art? I know the things that I like, and that's feeling, emotion, these kind of amorphous, like kind of human concepts that are just like, I want to connect to something on a soul to soul level as much as I do an intellectual level. And I need to connect to that kind of emotional level first. And then I dive deeper into it and really explore the piece. But everybody's different. And these are concepts that are difficult to express or even justify in today's art world, but they've always been around. And I think artists and people who know really understand that art is about the raw human energy, and you can't discredit that, even if it's not necessarily for a wall text. Not that I'm against a wall text. It's just there's this basic connection that needs to happen for me for it to be a good artwork, and that's what I'm after. So what about you? What are your things that really, I don't know?
It's a really good question. I think that, like feeling the energy and feeling like the aliveness from the piece is really important. And I feel like it's something that maybe only the artist can feel at the beginning, and then you have to pull that out. Because
Totally.
I have this all the time with pieces that I'm working on, and I show my partner and I'm like, oh, like this one, it's dead. Like it's not doing anything. And he's like, what are you talking about? No, it's really interesting. I love how you did this. And then a few weeks pass and I've changed it a bit, and I feel like I've pulled something out. And for me right now, something that's important is like lightness, like creating lightness, even though obviously it's never going to be light because it's marble, but like creating not the feeling of heavy. So it doesn't mean that it's a small piece or that it's a tiny amount of material. It just means that there's something about it that feels like it's just like resting for a moment before it continues on its path, like walking or flying or however it moves around. But like, to me, that the lightness and the energy seem connected. So I'm trying a lot to bring these out. And it's a real intellectual and emotional challenge too, because you have to push through those challenging moments of, I can't do it right now, or I'm not. And it's
exactly, because sometimes you think you're getting something across, and like I was saying earlier, it's so good to have other people around, and you with your partner, it's the same. Where for me, sometimes it's hard to actually see what I'm looking at because I've been looking at it for so long, for months. And then somebody else comes in with fresh eyes into the studio and sees it. And have you ever had this experience where they don't even need to say anything, but you can almost see it through their eyes, what they're looking at and what kind of, I don't know, it's actually expressing. And I'm like, I need to do this because it's not actually saying what I thought it was saying. So yeah, I think it's really important.
And it's interesting for you because I know that you're working primarily in figurative work. To be able to also experience that energy and that like kind of life through a figure in marble, because I know that, of course, everyone is familiar with the figure in marble. The legacy is enormous, the classical legacy, the Renaissance Baroque legacy. It's a weight upon us all. But you're reinterpreting and moving away from the kind of traditional figure in marble and creating something new and something spontaneous and worked and really both so refined and raw in the same moment. And I love the way that you've been exploring that. And I wanted to know, like, why the figure and like, what are you thinking about when you make these pieces?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because the figure for me, we start somewhere, and I started with the figure because it's what I was attracted to and it's what I grew up around, but I really responded to it And I got a fairly classical art training. I studied anatomy a lot and the drawing, the figure, and sculpting from life. And then as you age and progress as an artist, like different things come into view, what those values are that you're really trying to achieve. And for me, it was never about realism. So I had this training, but the training is to achieve realistic and this pretty definitive, this is good because it looks like the person. And I realized that's not what I'm interested in, even if I'm still interested in the figure. So I stopped working from life. I stopped working from the model, but I still had ingrained in me, embedded this anatomical structure and knowledge. And just like in life drawing, I like the quick sketch, 5-minute, 2-minute drawings, and there's this energy in it. And I was like, yeah, can I achieve this in marble in some way? I started working just directly in the stone and without a model. And sometimes I'll make a quick sketch in clay for about a half an hour just to play around with a couple of different poses and think about it. But then I just go for it. And so that has led me to a place where there's quite a range of work that I make. Like it ranges from a bit more naturalistic to the quite abstract or organic version of it. But I hope that it all still expresses me in some way, what I have inside, what I'm trying to get across. And the other thing I wanted to say about that is that this expressiveness, I don't know. There's a lot to say on it, but I just want to express myself more than anything. And the end result is what it is, and you can't really expect everybody to understand it, and that's fine. That's important. And sometimes I don't even understand it, and that's also okay. But there's this need to make something, and I think that's important in this world.
Totally. I mean, and I really love what you said about the quick sketch in marble, because I really see that. It's really seems like that's what you've done, like on a huge scale. And obviously drawing 2 minutes, 5 minutes, like a marble sculpture, it's not going to be at that point, but it's going to take weeks or months or if not years, right, to make. But the energy of that is there. And I really, when I saw your work in person, that's not how you described it. And so now when I'm thinking back on it, it really shines true. And I see that, especially also now seeing some of your 2D work as well. And that's a really interesting relationship that you have there, because I feel like with marble, the point is that it's like it's so over labored. It takes years. Absolutely. And there's teams of people working on them to make the David to be like a lifelike figure that he's just stepping forward or something like that. And I love that you came from this classical background where the figure was the focal point, and that's remained a focal point for you. But the way that you approach it, the meaning and how you're thinking about it has changed really deeply. And that's very clear.
Yeah. So it's not that I want to make the sculpture super quick. Like I don't need to make it in a day. I do take months on it. And that time period is important because I really appreciate layers and these kind of this progression of the form. And that's why a lot of my figures have this kind of unfinished quality, because I don't want to hide everything, the process. Lately, especially in marble sculpture, especially here in Carrara, but robotics and AI have become much more important to the economy and community here in Carrara and the world in general. AI and robotics go hand in hand, and they have allowed anybody to make something in marble. So there's a lot of artists around the world who have never considered working in marble until now, because it's possible. And I think that's really interesting because it's brought a lot of attention to the town, to the material. And it has also interestingly enough, given me a mode of talking about my work a little bit in contrast to these, because I don't care about this classical purity or anything, but working directly by hand in the stone, it does have a magical quality that is in contrast to the kind of cold robotic method. And I really don't want to disparage that because I think it's important. I've even worked on it a couple times with the robot, but I've learned that for me, what works is this handmade aspect because it gives me the time to be in dialogue with the material and with myself and reveal things that are unexpected and raw and energetic. And they're not always, there's different reasons to use the robot that are really valid that other artists are exploiting and exploring. And that's important. It's just, for me, I like talking about my work. It allows me to talk about it a bit in contrast to that, because art, since cave paintings has been about this kind of raw expression of self, like literally putting your hand on the wall, like no tools, just that's it.
I love that you've been able to discover like a new way of talking about your work in parallel to the robotics in marble. I don't want to say movement, robotics in marble situation that's happening, because I've heard a lot about it and I've met a lot of other artists who've actually been working with marble now, but they never even touched the marble. Like they live in another country and they create a file that then gets altered for the CNC machine to be able to read. And then it's almost like they print it. Obviously they're not printing it, but it looks the same because the finished product from the robot has all the like mill lines on it. And then that has to get smoothed out by hand. So of course there's still like a hand finished
absolutely
element to it. But it is totally different. Every decision has to be made ahead of time. It is the complete opposite of what we've just been talking about for the past half hour. So I find that to be like really curious that now there's like a competition or something, but in a sense it's the opposite. So it doesn't really feel the same.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, like, do you think people will realize? I don't know. Do you think there's going to be like a big situation where it looks the same? So
yeah.
But
totally. And that is the question, because I don't want to be in competition with it, because it would be easy to think of it that way. But I like to think of it as it's bringing awareness to marble, because marble is such a classical material and has all these connotations that are predominantly negative, I would say. There's not just the classical connotations, but fascism and propaganda and these uses that are quite gaudy. Donald Trump talking about the marble from Carrara in his bathrooms, and it's just, oh, it's so tacky and all this. But in art, there's two things. It is about what's happening in the moment, because art does reflect society in the moment that it's made. But there's also a timelessness to it. And I think that is really important to keep that perspective, that art is not just to be seen tomorrow, like on a fleeting Instagram scroll that you see it for a second and then it's gone into the void forever. I want my work to be experienced now and in 200 years. And that's it's at least part of the reason why I work in marble. There's maybe a bit of, I don't know, is that a little bit
like
presumptive?
Staying power.
Or,
yeah. I hadn't really thought too much about the staying power, but it has got a lot about just the fact that it is like a natural material and that it isn't like producing garbage and there's not like toxic fumes coming out of it like resin, which I used to work with a lot. Granted, of course, you have to be careful. You have to wear a mask, and we're lucky that marble doesn't contain silica, which is very dangerous for the human body. And of course, you have to be with your PPE always. But at the same time, like the byproduct is dust, and that just blows back into nature and it becomes, sand and rocks and everything. And to me, that was like a really comforting thing after working with a lot of artificial materials for a lot of years and doing resin casting and even plaster casting and all these things. It's just like there was so much waste. There was just so much that the thought of my work just like being in like a landfill one day or something was just like really overwhelming. And so the idea that, okay, like worst case, our sculptures will just be a big pile of rocks. It's like, it's not so bad. Yeah. Like, yeah.
Well, exactly. Because, we're making something like, to be an artist in general, you're making something out of nothing and putting it out into the world and expecting other people to appreciate it for this museum quality thing. But let's face it, it's not all museum quality. And a lot of it does just I don't want to add more trash to this world, the byproduct or the work itself. And
right.
And so working, I don't hold back when I work. I try to make as much as possible because I have to, for lack of a better reason. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I work in a very slow material and I end up only making about 10 pieces a year. And that's the nature of it. And for me, that's okay because it leads me to trying to dive deep into each piece that I make. They all have something that is worthy of the time. And I hope it's worthy of the time when the viewer sees it and spends time with it. And I talked about layers earlier because there's all these things that happen in the natural stone. There's the veining, the discolorations, and the little cracks that are natural. And I don't try to hide. Some of them happen from my hand, and some of them are natural in the stone. And that is all important. And you can see the process develop. And that allows the work to be explored more than just quickly seen.
Yeah. And I love how you were thinking about our time and what's going on and how that affects both the making of the work and the thinking about the work. And it made me think about what you've told me about some of the research behind the series you've been working on. And I wanted to ask if you could tell us about this idea of the monsters that you brought up and the kind of ensuing work that's come from this theme. And I know that's been important for you.
Yeah, because earlier we were talking about how the work, I don't always have a theme before I start, but sometimes these things reveal themselves. And this idea of the monsters, which is a series you saw here at the studio, I'm just working on a few medium-sized figures and actually 2 larger-than-life figures that push stylistically, like I was really trying to exaggerate the figure, exaggerate the muscles, and create these big, not scary figures, but just something that feels powerful powerful in a way. And as I was working on a couple of different figures, I started a block of marble a little over a year ago. At the time, just in the zeitgeist of society, I started to hear more about monsters, partly because I was thinking about it. I had it on my brain as I'm trying to essentially make a monster of some sort, and I didn't really understand why. And then I came across a couple of articles that just surprised me, like in the New York Times or whatever, are just talking about the quote from Antonio Gramsci talking about how now is the time of monsters, talking about Mussolini's time, how there's this void in society and things are changing, and coming in to fill in that void are these monsters. And it feels like we're in this moment in society. And so even though I don't particularly see my work as overtly political, I think I'm not going to shy away from it. I want the work to reveal whatever it's going to reveal. And that just felt like this natural kind of surprising thing that was happening in society, of this awareness that there's a lot of dark forces and monstery feelings happening in society. And so I continued on with this series, and it's progressed and will continue to progress. But yeah, that's what's interesting in art. That's the power of art, that it gets to reflect society.
Oh, thank you for sharing, because it's so interesting to hear about your ideas around this theme and how it was like recurring in the work after the conversation we've been having also about the figure and kind of the classical roots that you came from and then moving away from that. And it's really interesting to think about now, like the monster figure being this big marble piece instead of the perfect man or something like that. And it's like a real inversion, and it really speaks to the times that we're in. So I see that as being really valuable. And I think that's really exciting that you're going through that train of thought and yeah, pulling in really the moment of time that we're in into the piece. And I think that 200 years from now, maybe that's going to be like, oh yeah, the monsters, of course, that was the time, 2025, 2026, like that was really the time of monsters.
And you can't predict the future and you can't know what's happening, but artists, like, you're just trying to be as authentic as possible. And it's working in marble is so slow, and we're not just working on one piece at a time, like you say. It's progressing through an entire career, and you just have to be authentic to yourself. And sometimes the stars kind of align, and you do find yourself in a moment where your work resonates with a current moment. And I think that's really powerful and important to recognize. And I hope to be able to explore this more and show this work as a reflection. But even when you're not hitting on the zeitgeist, you just keep working and you just keep plugging away at it.
Of course, every piece is like an opportunity to develop more skill and more concentration and more timefulness as well, in terms of figuring out the dance. Because I feel like it's like a dance too. Like the marble responds and you have to respond. And especially when you find these little fissures and cracks, and maybe those you made them yourself, or maybe they're natural, but there's a lot of conversation between the stone.
Yeah. And I don't know how you feel, but it's exciting when you work in it and are just like, I sometimes feel a little schizophrenic. I'm a little all over the place, and I'm working on some plaster pieces because I'm feeling maybe a little anxious, and I have to do something really quick. And so I just throw some plaster on something, and it's a sculpture that can be done in a day, and that's really fun. And then sometimes I also have this series of figures that are in wax, and I'm just slowly building up layer by layer little bits of wax that I melt down, and usually beeswax, and I can kind of soften it and put it on in layers, and it develops this weird color of depth because it's transparent. And then clay that is also just, I really enjoy working in clay, but I hate turning it into bronze. It's just, I want the piece to be done when I'm done touching the clay. And that's how marble is. Like when you're done, you put that last mark on it. You don't have to do anything else to it. Whereas with clay, like you finish the clay and then you have to cast it in plaster and then take it to a foundry and make a mold and all this stuff that takes months and months. And it's just not really of interest. Yeah, we find these things that, like I said earlier, the kind of values that we have as artists, and sometimes we don't realize what those values even mean, but they're important. They're there for a reason. And I've heard you talk about the time aspect of your art, how it's important, this material that comes from millions of years ago, and it has this history. And for whatever reason, that really resonates with you. And you can dive deeper into that and understand why, like, this connection to Mother Earth that can be cheesy, or it can be really profound and really pure and important.
It's true. It's a boundary to be balancing all the time, is, talking to people about materials being hundreds of millions of years old, and like how you never think about this. And we never think about the timeline of the age of the earth. And we're hyper fixated on not having enough time, like the 24-hour day and the work week and the year. And well, in reality, it's just little blips in the in the age of the earth. And there's this incredible analogy from the book Timefulness by this really cool geologist, Marcia Bjornbrand or something. Her last name is very hard, so my bad, but I'll link it. And basically what she says is that if the earth were like a 24-hour day, like humans would appear in the last 2 seconds before midnight. And marble would appear at 11 p.m.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And dinosaurs like at 11:30 or something. It's crazy. Like the analogy of how we can really start to recontextualize a little bit. And I just love the playfulness of that metaphor, like in the daily life, and just thinking, okay, this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah. Time is so fleeting, and time is just, we don't need to get into the philosophy of time right now, but it's, but that's what artists do, right? You're sitting in your studio and you're just like, you remember, what it's all about. And it's just insane.
Yeah. There's a great podcast actually for anyone in the studio looking for something called Time Sensitive, all about time. So highly recommend that one.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. It's been so awesome getting to talk to you and learn more. Is there anything else you want to dive into?
I can't think of anything right now. I just wanted to have a conversation with you, and it's good to see you and talk to you about art.
Yeah.
So it's great.
I actually had one more thing that I just thought of, which is because it's interesting. Alex and I are on like parallel but opposite journeys, because he's from New York based in Italy, and I'm from Italy and I'm going to New York. And I wonder, like, how do you feel like there's still like a connection for you there? And is there anything that kind of, because obviously New York, talking about time, is so fast. Everything there is like, go, 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 work, work, work. And in Italy, we're much more slow. We have our time. We take everything slow as is. Everything gets done, but it's still the Italian way.
No, it was such an adjustment period, learning to walk slowly on sidewalks when you get stuck behind a nonna who's just in her own world. And then every 5 minutes taking a 5-minute smoking break, whatever. And then the coffee break 5 times a day. Oh, it's crazy. I don't know how you drink that much coffee and still work that slowly. But, actually I love it. And I like both versions. Like, I still love New York. And while I live here in Italy full time, I love New York, and I try to spend as much time there as possible, even if that's only 1 or 2 times a year. But yeah, I'd like to spend more time. So I'm glad you're making this adventure, this trek over there to spend more time over there.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we'll just have to keep both of those times alive. I feel like for me, when I go to New York, I click in as well to this like a bit rapid life. But the core of me is always going to have the Italian time.
Both things are important. And New York, like, you meet so many interesting people, and if I didn't have that in my life, it would be difficult to live just here in Italy. You need those fast-paced people, I think, as well.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. It's been so wonderful to connect with you. Before we go, I wanted to ask, where can people learn more about your work and reach out? Any social media or stuff to share?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram, which I'm not good at posting on. I go through streaks, so it's just at Alex Rane, and my website, alexrane.com, and I'm sure you can find me.
It was really great to chat with you.
Yeah, great to chat with you. Thank you so much.